Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rukus Reviews. I'm Joshua Blaylock, and today we're taking a look at Manhattan Project Energy Empire by Minion Games. World War II has ended and energy production has increased, and you are world leaders who are trying to increase your nation's prosperity by using various resources to strengthen the industry, commerce, and government of your country while also trying to minimize the effects that your prosperity is having on the environment. The Manhattan Project Energy Empire is a Tableau building worker placement game with a couple of interesting twists. First, all of the spaces on the main board have no limit to the number of workers that can be placed there, but each time that you place a worker on an already occupied space, you must spend more energy than anybody else that's currently there. Then, after placing a worker on the main board, you may then place any number of workers and or energy on the cards in your tableau. But while there is no limit to the number of tableau cards that you can activate, there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind. Aside from not being able to activate a card if you don't have enough workers or energy to do so, the space on the card must be unoccupied, and you may only activate your nation's card and cards of the same type as the spot on the main board where you placed your worker earlier this turn. Finally, Manhattan Project Energy Empire does not have a standard round structure, and players may, at any time on their turn, instead of placing a worker on the main board, choose to take all of their workers and energy off of the board and their tableau, and then roll the dice to see how much energy they're going to have for the next go around, and potentially pollute their environment just a little bit. So let's take a look at what I liked and what I felt could be improved about the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. The first thing I'd like to point out about the components and the things that really stood out to me the most is the pieces that are used for your resources. I really like the little I-beams that they use for the steel and the barrels that they use to represent oil. The plastic is kind of interesting. I mean, it's just clear plastic, little pink squares, but while it doesn't necessarily scream plastic to me, I don't imagine that I could think of a better component to use for that sort of a thing. It is plastic. Another aspect of the game I really liked is these workers. Each of the workers has a different piece of artwork on them, and they're kind of really interesting, cute little pictures of different kinds of workers. And then you have the components that are used for the energy, which all pretty much look exactly the same. Also, the cardboard that these are printed on is very thick. It's really nice. And then there are the dice. The dice come in 5 different colors. There's green, brown, black, blue, and yellow. And they all have a bit of a different function to them. The yellow one is the only one with the nuclear symbol on it. The green and blue ones don't have any kind of pollution symbol on them. And then the brown and the black one have a regular pollution symbol on them. Whenever you roll these dice, they not only tell you how much energy you get to use on your turn, but they also tell you if you're going to pollute your environment. Basically, the die that you roll that has the highest number tells you what kind of pollution you get. If the highest number doesn't have any pollution symbol on it, you don't pollute your environment. If it has the gas mask symbol on it, then you get a normal pollution. And if it has the nuclear symbol on it, then you get nuclear pollution. And of course, they all have varying numbers of energy symbols. The one with nuclear has the most energy symbols. The blue and the black one have the same assortment of symbols. And of course, every player board tells you the layout of each of the 5 dice, which pollution they give you, and how many energy you'll roll on which numbers. The board has a nice, if not a little bit bland, noirish kind of business desk feel to it, which I think is actually pretty cool. And the player board has this cool little environment track on it, which you use to decide, am I going to pollute the water, the land, or the air this turn. The cards themselves have some interesting pictures on them, though I don't usually wind up noticing them that much whenever I'm playing the game, because I'm usually paying a lot more attention to the symbols that are on the bottom. And the symbols that are on the bottom, for the most part, are really good at explaining exactly what that card is used for, whether it be gaining resources or converting resources. So this one, it's kind of weird. Most of the rest of the elements of the game are fairly standard. There's a bunch of cardboard pieces and a couple of wood discs that are used to keep track of your score and your progress on the United Nations track. The only aspect of the game that I didn't really care for is the player board, which is kind of just cardstock. I felt like I would have liked for this to be potentially cardboard or something that was a bit more sturdy, maybe even something dual layered so that you could more easily store all of the pieces that go all over this board. I also didn't notice that this is where you're supposed to put your dice until at least the second game that I played. The gameplay on this one worked a little bit differently than I expected. There's definitely some engine building in here, but the way the engine building works is something that I not only didn't expect, but it took me a few games to really figure out the proper way to strategize from the beginning to be able to get what I wanted at the end of the game. What I find interesting really whenever I'm playing this game is that I always have a plan that I'm going for, but every time it gets to my turn, I see, oh, well, maybe there's this thing over here that I'd really like, and I'm constantly being enticed by things that go completely against or just not toward the plan that I'm working for. There's always a bit of an uncertainty because really the engine building comes in buying a whole bunch of cards, but there's only 3 cards visible at any given time. So you don't exactly know what's going to come in the future there. There's also a problem that I'm constantly running into where I have a plan that I'm going to move forward, but then I realize whenever I get to a certain step that I either don't have enough workers and energy to be able to activate the spaces I really wanted to activate, or more common is that I just can't afford to do the thing that I wanted to do. Now, when I said that the engine building wasn't quite what I expected, what I generally expect a lot of times from engine building games is for your engine to build up and get stronger and stronger so that you can do more powerful things or stuff like that later on in the game. But the way that this one works is really that the engine just becomes more complex. The thing about this kind of engine building is that you really have to plan ahead for how you're going to build it in the future, and you have to pay attention to all the little pieces that you have and see how you can get pieces to play off of other pieces. Like for instance, I could use this card to get a coin and a victory point. Spend that coin to get an oil barrel. Spend that oil barrel to get a plastic and another victory point. Spend the plastic to get 3 more coins, and then spend those 3 coins to get 2 more victory points. I think once it gets to that point where you start hoarding things, you kind of have to change up your mindset at that point and stop paying so much attention to trying to get things that are just going to help you get other things, because at some point you really have mostly everything that you need, and start focusing on what's going to give you those victory points at the end of the game. If you have achievements for like collecting cards, then you might not want to pay so much attention to what those cards are going to give you and pay more attention to what resources you need to just buy more cards. But if you have an achievement for collecting resources, then hoarding resources is actually a really good thing to start doing. But you don't just have to hoard the resources that you need for your victory points. Hoarding any resources can potentially work to your favor, as there's one space on the board that allows you to trade any number of resources except for barrels for other resources. So I've a few times needed, for instance, plastic, but actually hoarded steel or money because I knew that at some point near the end of the game, I would be able to activate that trade space and trade all of those other resources that I had and just get a whole bunch of plastic. I really like the way the worker placement is done in this one. I like the fact that each space does not limit the number of people who can be there, but there is this cost of energy that you have to spend to go there. And then there's this whole dice element to it, where you can either spend barrels to temporarily get new die whenever you get to that part of the game, or you can buy permanent dice. And those dice have a risk to them because they could potentially pollute your environment. The yellow ones, which are by far the best dice to have, also have nuclear pollution, which takes a lot more to get rid of. There's a lot more energy that you can get than there are workers that you can get, and you can spend energy without workers to activate cards in your tableau. And that makes the risk really interesting whenever you're wanting to place a worker on a space on the main board, but there are already workers there, which means that you have to actually spend energy as well to put your worker there. And every energy that you have to spend to place a worker in a spot on the main board is one action potentially that you won't be able to perform later. So there's always a balance there that you have to make. Is what I'm getting from this space on the main board worth potentially not getting something from one of my own cards? And then there's also the whole aspect of you get to choose when you take your pieces back. Now, generally speaking, you're going to be taking them back whenever you just can't afford to do anything else. But there is one case for taking them back earlier. Technically, you could say there's two cases for taking them back earlier. You may want to take them back because you want to roll and you want to try and actually get pollution because you're trying to end the game. But the main reason to want to take your workers back early is because if you have at least 2 tiles, that's workers and or energy, left whenever you take your workers back, you get to select another potential achievement. The achievement tiles give you goals to work towards for the end of the game by giving you victory points for having certain things at the end of the game. That may be resources that you've hoarded, it may be the number of workers that you have, it may even be polluted spaces on your board, which essentially protects you from the risk of having polluted spaces, because normally a polluted space removes a victory point that you would have gotten. So getting a victory point for a polluted space means that you don't have to lose that victory point. And you can use the action that you would have spent to get rid of that pollution to do something else. The one area of this game that I did find a little bit frustrating is that I feel like it could be a little bit shorter. There are 6, you call them stages to the game. There are a number of pollution tokens that are stacked, and once you get rid of a stack of those pollution tokens, a card is flipped over. I generally feel like by the end of the 5th phase that should probably have been the end of the game. Generally because at that point, I really am done with the building of things, and now I'm just into the hoarding and collecting things, and I don't often find much of a use for buying buildings or really anything that's on the main board at that time. Most of what I care about is actually what's in my Tableau and activating my cards. And I often, by that time, am actually actively trying to add pollution to my own board, and then, of course, needing to remove that pollution so that I can end the game. Of course, my wife, who is generally a lot better than me at engine builders, does not feel the same way. She actually oftentimes feels like she was still building whenever I wind up ending the game, and like she really could have used a few more turns. And that's probably why this is one of the only engine builders that we've played together that I've actually beat her more times than she's beat me. The Manhattan Project Energy Empire is a great game. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at the beginning whenever I first started playing it, but as I've started to learn the strategies and really wrap my head around the times whenever you kind of need to change up your strategy and how to optimize that Tableau building aspect of the game, then I have really started to enjoy it. My wife has always loved the game since the very first time that we played. I love the way the worker placement is handled. I really love the way the strategy is handled, the progression of the game. I like that there is not a solid round structure to it, and there's kind of a bit more freeform as far as when you place and how many you place and when you take your pieces back. And it is our current obsession as far as Euro games go. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that look at the Manhattan Project Energy Empire by Minion Games. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think, if you disagree with any of my opinions, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see y'all next time. Until then, Rukus.